Ja, vielen Dank.
Well, thank you
Auch
so
lieber
much.
Frank Heinrich, Sie haben natürlich viele
Frank
Worte schon aus dem
Heinrich,
Mund
of
genommen,
course,
gerade
you
was
took a
die
lot of words right
Danksagung
out of
angeht,
my
die
mouth,
ich mich
especially
ganz,
with
ganz
regard to the
ausdrücklich anschließen möchte.
thanks that I
Wir
would
haben
like to
innerhalb
say as
von 10
well.
Monaten jetzt die zweite große
Within 10
Konferenz zu
months,
dritt
we
gestemmt,
managed
also
to
3
set up the
Organisationen,
second large
ODIHR,
conference, a
Gemeinsam
third of
gegen
us,
Menschenhandel und die
ODIHR,
Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung.
Gemeinsam gegen
Das
Menschenhandel,
war
and the
sehr viel Arbeit für uns
Konrad-Adenauer-Foundation.
alle,
That was a
aber wir haben
lot
ja
of
auch ein
work for all
gemeinsames
of
Ziel
us.
gehabt.
But
Und
of course,
als wir
we
jetzt vor
had
2
a
Monaten
common goal. And then,
darüber
when two
gesprochen
months
haben, wie
ago
wir
we
uns
talked
vor
about
dem Hintergrund des Kriegs
how
in der
to
Ukraine verhalten
handle the situation
wollen,
against the
da war
backdrop
ganz klar,
of
so
the
dringend
war in
jetzt auch der
Ukraine,
Fokus ist auf
one
die
thing was
Ukraine.
clear.
Wir können diese
As
Konferenz
urgent
nicht
as the focus
aufschieben
on
und herschieben.
Ukraine was and
Und
is,
gerade
we
die
cannot
Realität,
postpone
die
this
wir jetzt auch
conference.
erleben seit 2
And the
Monaten, dass
reality that we've
Hunderttausende von
seen for the past
geflüchteten
2
Frauen
months,
und
that
Kindern
hundreds of thousands
in
of
verschiedene Länder fliehen, auch nach
refugee
Deutschland, hier
women
nach
and
Berlin
children
fliehen, wo ich
flee
sitze
to
gerade,
different
und
countries, to
dass diese
Germany,
Frauen
to
auch
Berlin, where
zum
I'm
Teil
sitting at the
in
moment,
Unsicherheit
that
fliehen, dass sie also
these
sozusagen in
women
die
are fleeing into
Hände von
uncertainty
Menschenhändlern fliehen,
sometimes,
wo
into
jeden
the
Tag auch
hands
in
of
den
human
Medien in
traffickers,
Deutschland
where in the
vorgewarnt
media
wird,
in
wo die Polizei
Germany
präsent
we
ist, wo
see
viele
warnings day in, day out, where
zivilgesellschaftliche Organisationen
police is
präsent sind,
issuing
um diese Frauen
warnings,
und
where
Kinder
a lot of
vor diesen
NGOs are
Menschenhändlern zu
present
schützen,
to
vor
protect these
Prostitution,
women and children
Zwangsprostitution
against human
vor
trafficking,
allem zu
forced
schützen.
prostitution.
Das hat uns auch deutlich noch zusätzlich
All this
motiviert,
has
dass wir diese
made it very
Konferenz
clear to us
jetzt
that, or
gestern und heute
has
hier
been an
durchgeführt
additional
haben. Und ich möchte
motivation
mich ganz, ganz
to
herzlich auch
run
bedanken,
this conference
insbesondere auch
yesterday
bei
and today. And I would
Tatjana
like to say a
Kotliarenko, weil ich weiß,
very
dass
warm
sie
thank
sehr,
you
sehr
to
engagiert ist
Tatiana
seit vielen Jahren auch
Koliarenko,
in der
because
Ukraine.
I know
Und da natürlich
she's
jetzt
been
eine ganz
engaged in
große
Ukraine for many
Doppelbelastung
years
hatte
as
in den
well, and
letzten
she's had
beiden
a double
Monaten
burden
aufgrund der
over the past
Kriegssituation.
2
Also nochmal
months
ganz, ganz herzlichen
because of
Dank.
the war
Ähm,
situation in Ukraine. So
Das,
once
das
again,
Thema
thank you
Ukraine
so
hat,
much to
hat uns,
Tatiana.
glaube ich, die letzten Monate unglaublich emotional
Ukraine
belastet.
is
Und ich
something
möchte
that
das auch
has
sagen,
placed
mein
a
persönlicher
great
Eindruck, wir
emotional
hatten
burden on
gestern
all of us over the past 2
glücklicherweise auch eine
months. And
Präsenztagung in Berlin, wo
thankfully,
wir die
we
Panel
were able
auch
to have
persönlich, die
an
Panelistinnen persönlich
in-person
treffen
conference
konnten.
yesterday
Und
where we
ich
had
möchte mich
panels
auch
with
ausdrücklich
actual
bei allen
panelists.
Teilnehmern bedanken, die in
And I
Präsenz in
would like
Berlin
to
dabei
thank
waren,
all
die teilweise
participants
weite
who
Reisen
were
auf
there
sich
in
genommen haben,
person, who
namentlich auch
traveled far.
Frau Fein aus Israel, die gestern auch einen
Luba Fine
wundervollen
from
Job
Israel,
hier gemacht
who
hat mit ihrer
did a
Präsentation
great job
und hinterher
yesterday
noch in
as well
einem
with her
speziellen
presentation, and
Briefing
then
nochmal über die Entwicklung in
gave us a
Israel
special
informiert hat.
briefing
Das war sehr,
on the
sehr
development in Israel. That
wertvoll.
was
Dieses
very
Thema
precious
nordisches Modell in Israel und
because
im
the
letzten
topic
Jahr haben wir ja
of Nordic
spezifisch
model
auch
in
über das nordische
Israel,
Modell in
and
Schweden
then
eine
we
Studie der
also
Adenauer-Stiftung vorgestellt. Das Thema ist für uns alle
presented a
ganz, ganz
study on the
wichtig
Nordic
und
model
wir
in
leugsam
Sweden and the Adenauer
niemand
Foundation.
von den
This topic is
Teilnehmenden,
really important to us,
für
and
niemanden von
none of
uns
the
war das jetzt neu, dass man
participants,
die
none of us
Nachfrage nach
thought this was
Prostitution
a
senken
new
muss,
thing to
dass man
say
die
we need to
Nachfrage nach
reduce the demand
Pornografie
for prostitution
senken
and the
muss,
demand for
aber wie das
pornography,
politisch
but
aufgemacht wird. Das ist
how
gerade für
to do
Deutschland,
that
Herr Heinrich hat das
politically.
vorhin gesagt, der
Mr.
Begriff
Heinrich
Modell
mentioned it
Europas,
earlier,
das ist ja schon ein
talking
Begriff,
about a
der in Deutschland
model for
allgemein Begriff
Europe.
geworden ist. Das ist natürlich furchtbar,
This is
dass wir in
something
20
that's
Jahren so eine
become a bit
negative
of a
Entwicklung
commonplace
hier in
in
Deutschland
Germany, and
erlebt
it's
haben.
terrible to have seen
Aber
such a
da kann
negative
man ja
development in
politisch,
Germany over the past 20
gesellschaftlich
years.
massiv gegen
But
angehen.
from a political
Und
and
die
social perspective, we
Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung
can
ist
do
eine
something
politische
against this. And the
Stiftung.
Adenauer
Das heißt,
Foundation
wir
is a
haben
political
sowohl
foundation.
politische
That means
Themen
we
auf
have both
der Agenda
political
als auch
topics on the agenda
gesellschaftspolitische,
as well as
gesellschaftliche Themen. Wir sind
socio-political
ein
and
Think Tank,
social
aber wir
topics.
arbeiten halt
We
auch mit
are a think tank,
zivilgesellschaftlichen
but we also
Institutionen
work
zusammen.
with
Das heißt, für
civil
uns ist es auch
society
sehr wichtig,
organizations,
dass diese Fachtagung, die wir
and
jetzt
therefore it is very
innerhalb
important to
von 3
us,
Jahren auch
this
zum dritten
expert
Mal gemeinsam mit
conference that
Frank
we
Heinrich
have held for
und
the
Angelika
third time in
Franke
3 years, together
gemacht
with
haben,
Angelika Franke and Frank Heinrich,
dass diese Fachtagung keine
that
reine
this expert
akademische Tagung ist,
conference
sondern
is
eine
not
Tagung, wo wir
just
mit
an
Betroffenen
academic
sprechen.
conference, but
Und
rather a
für mich
conference where we
persönlich
talk with
war das in diesem
two
Jahr eine
survivors. And
besonders
personally, I think this year
erkenntnisreiche Geschichte, auch
I
gerade
have
mit Sandra Norak
learned a
von
lot
Gestag
from
und von den
Sandra
anderen
Norak of
Frauen von
Gestag
Eisdeck
and the other
und Männern
women
von Eisdeck
representing
zu hören,
Eisdeck
was das bedeutet,
and the men
betroffen
as
zu
well.
sein von
What does it mean
Menschenhandel
to
und
be a survivor, to be
Zwangsprostitution.
affected by
Das war
human
sehr, sehr, sehr,
trafficking
sehr
and
wichtig,
forced
auch,
prostitution?
auch
That was so
ermutigend in dieser Sache nicht
important. It was
nachzulassen, in dem Engagement
encouragement
nicht
for us
nachzulassen,
to
wie Heinrich
not
das auch gerade
stop.
gesagt hat. Diese Konferenz
As
ist der
Mr.
größte
Heinrich said
Stützpunkt,
it
was dieses
just
Thema
now, this
angeht.
conference is not setting a final stop behind this topic. What was also important was the exhibition, I Am Her Voice. This very impressive exhibition and the artwork that we were able to exhibit in the Adenauer Foundation, albeit just for a day. But you have also seen the artworks in a digital presentation. They are available online and they are worth being looked at, being viewed, being shared, because they express so much about how people feel who have suffered through all this and how they manage to use art to deal with all this. A friend of mine who's a psychologist and a therapist, she said, Oliver, the people who are at the conference, they are not the weak people who come and talk to me. They are the strong ones. They are the ones who manage to deal with the situation, also in the scope of such a conference. And I must say, the two conferences I witnessed last year and this year, and also the other talks on human trafficking, on forced prostitution, on abuse, all those that I've seen over the past 2 years, I bow to the strength, to the power of the survivors, of the victims. And in the scope of these final comments, that is what I want to emphasize once again. I bow to you. I respect the energy, the power, the courage, the perseverance, and the will to sustainably change public perception, to fight for changing the perception in Germany. We heard this from MP Winkelmeyer-Becker yesterday as well, who's been working in this field and who wants to introduce the Nordic model in Germany. And she said a very important sentence, that in Germany, in the German public, we need to make a lot of effort before the public is ready to accept and support the Nordic model. And Luba Fein told us yesterday that in Israel this took a lot of time as well, until Israelis, not just from the political left, but from all of society, were happy to back the model. And now we have 85% of people in Israel who think that prostitution is against human dignity. And in Sweden, where we've had the model for 23 years, there are similarly high numbers of those rejecting prostitution. I think in Germany we are on the right track, that in this cooperation that we've seen over the past 2 days, where we were able to reach out to many people worldwide in this international conference, I'm really happy that we were able to go beyond the German and the OSCE sphere with the Philippines, for example, and talked to people about this topic. I'm very happy about this, and I think international cooperation is really important, civil society cooperation, but also political, and I think we can learn a lot from countries like Sweden and Israel, who have implemented the Nordic model for a few years now. Here in Germany we can learn a lot, and we know that a lot of effort is needed here in Germany. We heard that, we know that. We know everyone who is familiar with the situation in Germany and the current government. The current coalition agreement of the governing parties does not even mention human trafficking. So there's going to be a lot of hard work. To quote Max Weber, politics means hard work. And the Red-Green government brought us this misery 20 years ago to make prostitution socially acceptable, with all the terrible effects that it had. And I must say, I do not trust the new government at all with regard to this, to say that they will turn around the policies and remedy the errors or mistakes they made 20 years ago. So as a final political statement, that is what I want to make. I would like to once again thank all participants. It has been a very exciting conference with more than 40 speakers and a lot more guests who listened, who also actively participated. I would like to thank you all, and I'm hoping to see you again soon, be it in Berlin or elsewhere, at a conference on this topic. Thank you very much.